Welcome back to Daciple Ministries, where disciples are influencing people's lives every day. So today I want to officially launch the second aspect of my ministry. The first one is, of course, the aspect that I've been doing since the launch, sharing my testimonies and giving you all what God has put on my heart concerning His Word and preaching and teaching the gospel. However, God has also put another ministry on my heart, and I want to share what that is and where it originally stemmed from. I hope everyone is going to stay tuned, because while this ministry has a big focus on a certain demographic of society, I believe that what I am going to speak about is something that absolutely every single one of us deal with, and most people don't even realize it, or if they do, they have no real idea how to deal with it. Today I'm going to confront it and give some methods on how to deal with it and overcome what this thing is that is hidden within us all. That thing is something that I have discovered has grasped, influenced, and kept me under bondage for my entire life. Something that has been and is at the root of many of the negative behaviors that I have projected over the years. In fact, having come to understand some things about this, it has caused me to create this ministry that I am excited to get off the ground, because I realize this isn't a me problem or a you problem, but it is a human problem. The thing that I have been led to realize by God that has been a major component of how I act, of what causes me to do many of the things I do not want to do, that has led me to treat others so terribly in my life that I can see affecting people all around me, is this hidden in the shadows, is never addressed, and it is a monster that is called shame. Shame is more than just a feeling. Shame is more than just a word. Shame is more than just a thought. I have come to understand shame as being an active force wielded by one who hates us all, to keep us in bondage, into bondage of fear, of anger, of mistrust, and it is used to prevent us from living, acting, and loving like the one who cares for us all. Once I came to realize and understand the complexities of shame, what it is, how it operates, how it affects us, it was like this light bulb just went off. It was like, holy crap, now everything makes sense as to why I am the way that I am. And that is because I have been in the grips of shame for longer than I can remember. It was by God's grace that I was led to understand what shame is. My pastor recommended me watching a video of his counselor who talked about shame to a group of addicts. I'm going to link the video below because I think everybody needs to watch it. But during that video, he mentioned a book called The Soul of Shame by Kurt Thompson, which changed his life and was the guiding principle of his speech. When I watched that video, it impacted me greatly, and I immediately read the book, which went into great detail about those things that he spoke about in the video. There are only a few things I can say that are life-changing moments for me. And I can tell you, waking up to understand shame, that video and book have been life-changing moments. I highly recommend watching the video and reading the book for yourself, but I want to give you my view and understanding of the dynamics of shame here for a starting point of those who happen upon this video. The way you may think of, or at least I used to think of shame, was that it was just one huge box of emotions, and we engage with it briefly here and there and move on from it as we do many of our other emotions. We get angry at times, but we move past it. We get sad at times, but we move past it. We get afraid sometimes, but we get past it. We get happy sometimes, and we get past it. Usually emotions are these feelings we experience, but eventually return to a normal emotional level. I had always thought of shame as being in that same vein. However, I have come to understand that shame is not just an emotion, but shame is an active agent that is continually influencing us at every moment once we come under its grip. Shame operates in the dark, not wanting to be exposed for what it is, because it is that exposure that begins to weaken its strength. Have you ever thought of how shame manifests itself? Have you even pondered what shame is and what the root of it is? I never did in the past, but I'm here to relay to you what I have come to find out about how shame operates. And I'm going to lay out for you, through my personal life, how it has come to entrap me, and how it has caused me to be a complete and total jackhole to almost everybody that I know and care about. I can't get into the tiny details. Read the book if you want to know about that aspect. But shame is not only an emotion, but it is a neurological response to stimuli in our lives. Our brain takes an event and then marries it with the emotion we call shame, and then begins a process that is all at once physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Shame is deeper than a thought. It's deeper than an emotion. It is deeper than a spiritual aspect. It takes all and it combines it into a physical response, a neurological pathway that completely reroutes how our brain processes information. As I first said, shame is an active force. It is its own independent identity that has buried its way into all facets that make us human, and its primary objective is to destroy us and keep us from thinking, responding, acting, or feeling in a truly loving and a relationally healthy way to not only others, but also ourselves. I'm going to start by giving you examples I have come to understand from my own life as to how shame is created, manipulates, and then destroys. And as I know that this is a human problem, I believe that many are going to relate. The biggest driving factor of shame in my life has been, with zero doubt, my relationship with my father. Now, I don't blame him anymore for what he has done, because I recognize that shame is passed down from others to others. In the book, they sum it up simply by saying, those who are in shame, shame others, and nothing could be more true. My whole life in the relationship between me and my father has completely and totally revolved around him casting shame on my every thought and move. He was a great father in many ways. He has always been there in a physical way of providing, but concerning anything emotionally or spiritually, he has been nothing but a negative influence. As an example of how our relationship operates, even to this day, as a child, if I would bring home my report card and I had 2 A's, a B, and a C, as I would try and point out the A's to have him try and build me up, he would just ignore that and point out the C's and tell me that I needed to be better. If I attempted to just do about any task my way, on my own, he would either come up behind me and tell me I'm wrong and point out why it wasn't done properly, or even worse, he would just come up and completely redo it. If I say something about a movie I like, he will tell me why it's not that good. He'll bring up a movie that is better. I mean, the list literally can go on and on and on and on of ways and times in which my father, knowingly or unknowingly, has continually cast shame down upon me. And every time that emotion is felt, it is paired with a physical neurological response. And when those things are combined, it has massive and negative dramatic effects on one's psyche. This is a lifelong bombardment of shame, and it has caused me to feel as though I am ultimately a completely and terrible human and horrible person that can never be deserving of anything good or of love, because literally everything I do, think, and say is wrong or bad. Having this constant emotional, mental, spiritual, and moreover physical warfare in your mind, body, and soul is not only terribly exhausting, but causes one to react to every situation as though all people, all activities are eventually going to result in that horrible pain of shame. And thus, you develop all these defensive tactics to try and keep all of that at bay. Because of my shame, I have evolved to, at all times, be ready to destroy, hurt, and to go to combat with anyone I meet. On my first meeting with people, my go-to move was to instantly try and shame them somehow, to make sure that I would strike first, and therefore I wouldn't be as vulnerable to be hurt by them. Of course that is stupid, but I think everyone can understand it. It's like a wounded animal in a trap. Even if someone is coming with the intention to help it, because it's been hurt so much, it instantly lashes out. In the past, I could recognize that I would do these things, but I could never understand why I would do it. Deep down, I really, truly wanted to be nice to people, to love others, to care for others, but I wasn't capable of truly doing that because I was totally immersed in shame and the fear of rejection that shame causes, that I could only react to everyone and everything in these negative ways. I, with zero doubt, believed that shame is at the root of just about every sin. That it is shame that causes us to act like total monsters to one another. It is shame that causes us to hate ourselves and others, that causes us to hurt ourselves and to hurt others. We all have a tendency to look down on those who are homeless or drunkards or drug addicts. But have we thought of what it is that is causing them to be trapped in that state? I can guarantee you that shame is the number one component that has them in the place that they are. When we are engulfed in shame, we will do whatever it takes to try and numb that awful emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical pain. Some resort to drugs and alcohol, which in turn amps up the shame and creates that cycle of bondage. Some turn to sex and end up giving themselves over to any and everyone in hopes of overcoming shame that again turns into more shame and creates that cycle of bondage. Some turn to anger and violence, taking their shame out on others to make them feel better about themselves. But again, it ends up making them feel more shameful, and in the end, that continues the cycle of bondage. Some manipulate, stir up drama, and sack others emotionally to overcome their own shame, what eventually makes them feel shame for their actions, and the cycle of bondage continues. Shame is a non-stop force that brings all of us to become monsters we all say we aren't, that we all try and hide, but we all know deep down is true. So maybe you are realizing the reality of your own shame and the power it has over your own life. Maybe you are recognizing why you have been trapped in doing things you never thought you would do and continually doing them even though you truly want to stop. When I came to that place, all I could think of was, how do I overcome this shame? So the first step is to actively recognize it for what it is. If you cannot get to the place in which you can identify what it is, how it has control over you, and begin the journey to understand how shame has been placed and manifested in your life, then you will forever be under its control. As I said before, shame lives in the dark corners. Shame pops its head up like a guerrilla fighter to drop a bomb, then it escapes unseen as you start fighting everything else besides it for the damage that it caused. Shame's primary power is its ability not to be recognized, because as long as you refuse to acknowledge it, it can wreak havoc in your life, unattended and forever. Some may say, well, since shame is essentially just you thinking you're bad, just start thinking more positively about yourself. That seems reasonable until you come to grips with the fact that shame is not just a thought or a feeling that you can just think your way out of. It is literally a physical entity that resides in the brain that has attached your emotions to literal neural pathways of your thinking. There are only two methods of overcoming shame, and one is way more difficult than the other. I'm going to give you the easy one first, and that is to begin to have experiences that rewire how you think. In other words, look to go have experiences that reshape the neural pathways to cause positive emotions to be attached to positive actions. It is literally doing the opposite of how shame was manifested in your brain. You had negative feelings constantly being attached with how you have thought of yourself and others. Thus, shame became the active force in your thoughts and emotional life. A way to combat that is to go have positive experiences that shape and frame your thoughts and emotions about yourself and others in a positive way. I personally have much work to do in that aspect of me going out and beginning to have these positive experiences so that I can rewire how my brain thinks and processes emotion, and that way that I react and think of myself and the world around me. While I've yet to be able to truly seek those things so far due to circumstances I've been dealing with, I know that as far as tasks go in trying to overcome shame, that is going to be by far easier than the second aspect that is needed. There is one particular emotional state that shame is 100% tied to. While shame acts as a catalyst in driving just about every emotional aspect, the negative ones like anger, sadness, etc., there is one emotional state that shame is actually trying to keep from being brought into the forefront. Shame is happy to bring anger to the forefront. Shame loves to bring sadness up. Shame loves to amplify worry. But there is one emotional state shame is actively trying to hide and cover up, to be bigger than, so you never actually consider it or live in it. And that emotional state is vulnerability. You heard that right. The emotional state that shame never wants to be discovered and understood, to be grasped and lived in, is complete and total vulnerability. It is such a mind-blowing revelation to realize, to recognize, that the greatest way to combat shame is to be as vulnerable as possible, as much as possible. And let me tell you that it is an exceedingly harder thing to do than to have fun to rewire your brain. Shame and vulnerability dance a twisted dance. Being vulnerable opens you up to being hurt. Shame lives to activate all the other emotions to at once defend and trap you in the pain of being hurt. Shame and vulnerability both ride in the car of fear. We are afraid of being vulnerable because we fear being hurt. Shame doesn't want you to be vulnerable because it is afraid of being exposed. What I can tell you is this: there is no way to overcome shame unless you are willing to start down a path of opening yourself up and becoming vulnerable, and especially being vulnerable about your own struggles with shame. No one wants to admit or believe they are living under the control of bondage of shame. No one wants to admit or believe that no one wants to talk about where shame has taken them and caused them to do. No one wants to talk about their faults, their failures, that they have been one of the driving aspects of shame that has been created in them. No one wants to talk about the abuse that they have endured that has given rise to the monster of shame that resides in them. Shame actively knows this, depends on this, and works to keep us from ever having the fortitude to step out and be vulnerable enough to tell others all about these things. Because shame knows that once we get to that point, once we open ourselves and be totally transparent about these things, shame begins to lose its power and grip over us. Even as I speak this and think about being vulnerable, I can feel the fear and anxiety rising up. I can feel the shame trying to activate every part of my emotions and thoughts to never reveal these things about myself. I can feel the shame preying on my insecurities, telling me right now, just think how stupid you will look. Think how people will make fun of you. Think of how weak you will look talking about this kind of stuff. Yet, I had the resolve at this time to be as vulnerable as I can, to tell everyone about the things that have happened in my past that created my shame, to tell all the horrible things that I've done under the influence of shame, to take responsibility for every single negative word, thought, and action I have done, as I have allowed shame to act as vitriol out in my life. I read another book, one I highly recommend about being vulnerable, by Brené Brown, called Daring Greatly: How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transformed the Way We Live. In it, she points out that even though our thoughts tell us when we step out to be vulnerable, we're going to be seen as weak, stupid, and people will make fun of us, the opposite is actually found. Instead of people seeing us as weak and stupid and then making fun of us, most of them actually see us as courageous. My thoughts and emotions, which are being manipulated by shame, are telling me never to send this out. My intellect, being refined through this journey, tells me I need to send this out and hope as many people as possible watch it. Not that I think that I am courageous to speak out about such things, but because I know that this act of vulnerability is another nail in the coffin of the power of shame over my life. As I come to a close in this message, I want to leave you with a thought and an idea, one that God has stirred in my heart to be the basis of this ministry, which I hope and believe He will bless and give me the opportunity to walk out more and more in the near future. To this point, I have spoken of shame mostly about its effects upon us mentally, emotionally, and physically. However, there is a much deeper aspect of it that resides in a spiritual place. This isn't the space to get into this fully, but as I have been studying, reading, and praying concerning shame and vulnerability, God asked me a question, one I have never, ever in my life even contemplated. God asked me, do you think I'm vulnerable? So that is the question. Is God vulnerable? I've asked a few brothers at church the same exact question, and it is interesting to see the reactions they give. One brother, whom I love very dearly, projects himself to others as very strict Christian, very by the book, very unemotional. And when I asked him, he almost seemed to get offended that I could think to ask if God could be vulnerable. I asked another brother who had been through some things in life, who shared these things publicly with the church, and he said he really hadn't thought of it, but he might possibly see it, but not really. I finally shared it with my counselor, who had been on this journey with me, and he said, yeah, probably. It's funny because that is exactly how I reacted in succession in a very short time frame after God asked me if I thought He could be vulnerable. My immediate thought and response was, are you kidding me? God can't possibly be vulnerable. He is God. That would collide with His nature. He is perfect. Nothing can get to Him. Nothing can hurt Him. He is above all things at all times. And as I was thinking these things, God turned my attention to Jesus Christ. When my mind began to think on Jesus, I was overwhelmed and flooded with the true answer, the definitive answer. See, Jesus Christ opened himself to humanity in a way no other human being can possibly imagine. God showed me Jesus walking down the road to Calvary, being beaten and spit upon. He showed me Jesus hanging on the cross, completely naked, totally open to all the terrible things that all of humanity could throw at him. Jesus Christ stepped out and went to a place of vulnerability that none of us can possibly comprehend. And he did it knowing that he was going to be completely and totally rejected by everyone, and even would have his own Father turn away from him. There is no doubt in my mind what the answer to that question is. Yes, God became vulnerable, and he did it so that he can overcome our shame. It is my hope in my upcoming ministry to relate to others through our shared shame, and from that place give them the real way to overcome shame. And that is by knowing who Jesus Christ is and what he has done to triumph over our shame. I hope that whoever you are, if you have watched this so far, that God has stirred up something in you, something to get you to recognize the power of shame has over you, something to get you to understand why you turn to sin and the cycle you find yourself caught in, something to get you to step out and open yourself in vulnerability to begin to defeat and overcome that monster of shame. And more than anything, I'm hoping that you come to a place to recognize who Jesus is and what he has done and the lengths of vulnerability he has gone to so that you can be freed from your shame. I will leave you with this quote from the Bible that is the basis of this aspect of my ministry, which is from Hebrews 12:2, which says, "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God." Jesus turned the shame of the cross into our joy. And I pray that we all turn more to Christ so he can turn our shame into joy. And with this as the basis, God has laid on my heart the ministry to reach out to those who find themselves in places none of us would ever wish to see ourselves or our loved ones in. The ministry, which I have called Despising the Shame, is devoted to reaching out to those on the street, to those whom society has cast out and who, for the most part, look down upon. It is a simple, but I believe will be, and already is showing to be a powerful ministry to reach those who most, including the church, have neglected. And it comes from a very basic idea, and that is to just go to those on the street, either offering them clothes or food, and tell them, "I just want to sit with you and get to know you." All I want is to give these people the very basic thing that most of society won't, which is a simple human interaction. And it is from that place that I believe and have already witnessed that God will open up doors to share both the power of shame and, moreover, the true remedy of shame, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. I hope you all will pray with me concerning this ministry. If you have heard my testimony, then you will know that I am utterly convinced this is what God has called me into. If you haven't, then in short, God spoke to my heart one day telling me that I need to go find someone in the dirt and the mud and tell him that Jesus heard his cry and that he loves him. God sent me over 3 miles in the heat and led me to a young man who was panhandling on the side of a highway exit. Jesus said, "Go up and to speak to him and tell him that I heard his cries and that I love him." At first, when I offered to buy him something to eat and get to know him, he rejected me. Then, once I mentioned the name of Jesus, he got so upset that he walked away from me. I broke down under an overpass next to the highway praying for him, and God spoke to my heart and said, "You know that this man could kill you for what you were trying to say to him, right?" And I responded, "Yes, Lord, I know, but I don't care. He needs to hear it." A few seconds later, he approaches me, and eventually he allows me to buy him a drink and some smokes, and I was given the opportunity to just talk to him like a human being. And I was able to tell him what God had said, that Jesus sent me to find someone, him specifically, in the dirt and the mud, and to tell them that I loved them and heard their cries. When I said this to him, I saw something change. I saw something hit his heart. And it was then that he said something that clearly proves that this was a divine intervention and not a coincidence. That it was God himself who sent me directly to this man personally that day. What he told me was, last night I tried to kill myself. I was sitting on a railroad track waiting for a train to hit me, and then something out of nowhere pulled me off the track. That, of course, is when I exclaimed that it was Jesus, that he loved you, and then he heard his cries. It was an amazing and exceedingly impactful moment in my life, and it solidified the reality of what God has called me into with this ministry. And it is my hope in Christ that he continues to lead me to these people who need to simply be treated like a human being, offered food or clothes, and then told about both the grasp of shame that it has on their lives and the medicine needed to overcome that shame, and more specifically their sin, so that they can come to understand and believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I hope you continue to stay tuned for the updates as I relay the mighty acts of Jesus in others' lives. And I ask that you please pray for me in the ministry, and when I begin to share updates about the people God leads me to, that you pray earnestly for them as well. If you would like to support the ministry, I can tell you it will be greatly appreciated. Anything offered will go directly to help those that I come across. And by support, I don't only mean financial, but I also would love to find resources to help those that I meet. I would love to be able to direct them to shelters, to offer job opportunities, to offer rehab centers, to offer churches who are fully equipped to preach the true gospel in spirit and power and have the resources to care for those in these kinds of places. I have clothes at the moment to give to some, but I hope I will be able to give them all the way soon. So if you would like to donate clothes, I would love to take them. If there's anything at all that God puts on your heart that I haven't thought of or mentioned, please reach out to me at 513-717-7127, or you can email me at dacipleministries@gmail.com. That is DACIPLE ministries@gmail.com. I will leave the number, email address, and methods to donate in the posts. And if you see this on YouTube, head to discipleinc.com. That is DACIPLEINC.com, and click on DST Ministries at the top, and all the information will be there as well. If this has made an impact on you, then please like and share if you are seeing this on Facebook, or like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you are seeing this on YouTube. I love you all. If you need anything at all, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will do the best that I can to help. But even if I can't help, I know someone who can. This man named Jesus.